guys, so we are back with a viewer question answering with Brian and Ryan from Undertaking the Podcast.
Brian.
If you have not checked it out yet, shame on you. Go do it. So we're gonna answer a question from LPorter, who is one of our viewers here on YouTube. Kari, love your channel. Truly feel it's direct and honest. I like reading the good stuff about myself, by the way. After reading that, somebody told me my face looked like poop. I gotta read the good stuff too. So
Gotta read it.
I found myself planning a funeral last month, and the director thought I worked in the business. It was great. I'm still debating going to school. Since the funeral industry is a business, at what point in the funeral home director responsibility released from the liability from the time of taking the deceased into their care until fully buried or cremains returned to family?
When are we released from liability?
Yes.
Are we?
I'll say this, I tend to stay with the decedent until the vault top is actually placed on the vault. After that, I wouldn't say, would liability be gone? I don't know.
I don't think there's a clear-cut end to liability. It can always come back up. There's a time frame of your work as a funeral director that you are liable for, and no matter when or where in the future, someone can come back on you and make a complaint, make a claim. So you've got to do your best. So there's really no, I suppose we got to say, where's the end of the time frame, whether we're doing a burial or cremation. I would believe when our job is complete, to where if we're returning cremated remains to a family, the transition of care is passed to the family, or in a cemetery, the transition of care has been passed to the cemetery, and our job is finished. There's no more tasks for us to do.
But liability can definitely come back later.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Disinterred body
What
that.
do you guys think is the biggest liability when it comes to funeral
With the
directors?
body?
Just with funeral directors.
With funeral service,
Oh.
I think it's the body.
Emotional distress of the family.
Which can
Because it all comes
anything.
back to that,
Yeah.
I think, because that's gonna be the number one. It's the thing that you can't prove, like how somebody's feeling. There's
Yeah.
no real gauge except for their their vocalness of it. So anything on the body.
For
and-
attorneys, that's the
yeah.
one go-to.
Yeah.
Every suit with a funeral home, we go to intentional infliction of emotional distress, because when we have an intentional infliction, we have treble damages.
Yep.
And your insurance as a funeral home is not going to cover that. So clearly, you're not going to want to do something on purpose to where that,
Right.
but that's going to be the claim, is that instant claim that you did it on purpose, which you're going to have to speak for.
Dropping a body, burning the wrong body at the crematory.
Wrong clothes, wrong jewelry, wrong casket.
That's not mom or dad in the casket, things
Yeah.
like that.
Wrong
That's happened.
casket,
It's
That's
happened.
happened, guys.
Yeah.
So
Shaved off facial hair when they
Oh.
were
Shaved off
supposed
facial
to.
hair.
Things you can't reverse, like
you
And,
can-
upside down.
and actually,
Yeah.
one of our friends that we met, Chelsea Tolman, who wrote the book Speaking of the Dead, had a brief in that our mistakes as funeral directors are not really intentional. That rarely ever do we say, okay, we're going to do this to you. It's just human error. We make mistakes because we're tired, we're busy, we got too much to juggle, and
or lack of education.
and boy, do we're probably our worst critics. We beat ourselves up, we stay up, we worry, and it happens.
we know it's a once in a lifetime thing, that you cannot redo this moment for this person's end of life. So we know that, but yeah, mistakes unfortunately do happen, and
We have to own them when
yes.
we do.
And sometimes they're
Just be detailed.
devastating.
Just be
Right.
detailed, guys.
Lists.
And,
A million
lists are big.
lists.
I have lists.
Yeah, you got to make a list to make your lists.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And check your list.
Absolutely.
We do our best. We're just everyday people. That's it.
Right.
And we try.
Yep.
You took your cape off every day for
Yeah. This is when you should rip open the shirt with the S
There
on
you
it.
go.
Come on.
And say you're welcome.
What goes into the process of cleaning and sterilizing equipment? Prep room floors to the trope car.
How about it?
The
buddy?
process, I use a lot of disc spray. I use disc spray or soap.
Which is a chemical.
Yeah, I'm
but
sorry.
We purchase.
I use that a lot when it comes to my instruments. I always clean the instruments once I'm done. I try to have them, if I've used them, I have them soaking in disc spray. You know, if I have to go back and use them again, I have them soaking right there in a kind of a, what would be a little metal, what would that be, trough?
Like a
I guess,
tray?
Yeah, tray.
Trough.
Trough tray, whatever, but I usually have those soaking in there, and then if I need to reuse them, I can, but I put them back in there for disinfectant. What I always worry about is, and for those of you that don't understand maybe what tissue gas is or what happens there, it can actually, it has to do with decomposition or whatnot, but it can get on your instruments. If you don't clean your instruments, you can be infecting that next decedent with your instruments and creating more problems for yourself.
You think you can name the bacteria?
Clostridium. There it
It's
is.
a fun name.
Ah,
There you go.
there it is. So no, I can't say it. But
I think our general rule, and I believe most funeral directors or embalmers are similar to this, I would hope so. If it gets dirty, you clean it.
I tend to clean as I go.
And you're gonna
too.
clean not just with water, you're gonna clean with a chemical. We try to stay away from bleach in our care center. It's not a good thing to mix with other chemicals. We try not to mix other chemicals in general, but there are chemicals that we can purchase from supply companies for our preparation room, our care center. And if we use it, we clean it. A lot of times the process will go, we'll soak, then we'll lay out for drying, we'll spray, we'll wipe.
There's some people that have like autoclaves.
I am jealous of the ones with autoclaves.
Me
I
too.
want it.
Me
I've
too.
had that question this last week. Somebody asked me how many have autoclaves, and I said, I've worked in a good number of prep rooms and never one with an autoclave.
Haven't seen one yet.
But they're not really, I don't even know how they're big enough for a trocar to fit in there.
Not big enough
because
for a trocar.
They'd have to be a very large one for a
Yeah.
trocar, and that's the instrument you really need to
Oh, yeah.
disinfect
Absolutely.
because you're transferring that bacteria and
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Literally everything you touch in the prep room becomes contaminated from point A to point B. And you really have to just, in a way, break down your embalming room, your preparation room. You know,
wash down the
often.
walls, to
Wash
the
down walls,
floor.
anything that you touch.
Yes. Have you ever heard of a family having to switch funeral homes due to cost? And she also later asked, have you ever had a family call to pick up a body, then they abandon it? So we can hit both of those.
Abandoned first.
So, yeah, abandoned
Um,
body.
It doesn't happen often.
It doesn't, the abandonment doesn't happen often, but you do run into issues, maybe sometimes getting a hold of family members.
Chances are it probably happens across the country every week where a family will call a funeral home and then they can't be contacted.
Yeah, and that's kind of the things we run into.
For us.
And that creates an immense amount of liability for us as well.
Yeah.
If
For
we-
us, probably once or twice in a career. I haven't had it.
I just had it last week.
2 years in, you've had it.
And larger places deal with it more often, but it's not so much that they've called the funeral home, it's that the body's abandoned at the hospital and then they're transferred to the medical examiner. So essentially, the medical examiner will call a funeral home trying to have a funeral home help them care for an abandoned body.
Yeah.
Because they call it unclaimed, where a family is not going to claim the person. They need to process and either bury or cremate the person. And it's not always due to finances, it's just due to sometimes lack of family or
They don't wanna
lack
do it.
of caring.
Yeah.
They just don't
Which
want
is
to, so
immensely sad.
it happens quite a bit. I can't imagine in the city like Chicago or New
Oh, boy.
York, how often
Often.
that has to be happening, because it's all, like homeless people where you can't track to family and
Yeah,
stuff,
well,
so.
we'll see names run in obituaries where the coroner or the medical examiner is looking for family.
Oh, yeah.
And
Trying to
sometimes
track.
they don't find them, and then the county or the township or the society, the group of people have to do something about it.
Right.
And they will after a while.
So then transferring funeral homes, I've talked about this, trying to empower, because it's a big thing to me that just because you've called a funeral home at that time, if you do not connect with that funeral home, get out. You do not have to sit
Run.
there and work with somebody that you don't connect with, that you feel is being rude, that's maybe dirty, that's gross.
Or if you're feeling pressured.
We've talked about the red flags on our podcast.
Red
numerous
flags.
Yes.
times. It's okay to step back, stop things, and reevaluate. We've talked about that numerous times, and we've even pointed out some of the red flags. If you don't feel you're getting honest answers, if you feel like that maybe the funeral director is being vague, it doesn't hurt to stop and ask a question. Call another director and just see. You never know, But yeah,
I've always said when choosing funeral homes, it's real simple. Take maybe 5 minutes of your time to call 3 funeral homes. You're gonna find out real fast who
Yes.
you wanna talk to, because you're gonna find one grumpy old man, you're gonna find someone who doesn't have the time to deal with you, and then chances are you might find someone who thinks you're your long lost cousin, and you would love to talk to them.
But from the idea of transferring from cost, it does happen, but that's all about what you value as well as a
Yeah.
consumer.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember, you are the one that is paying for this, you're the consumer.
Yeah.
So what do you value? Yeah, if you think something is a little bit too expensive, people price shop all the time. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily out of the realm to go do that. So
Yeah.
go do that if you want to look at that, but see what services are being provided for that cost. If something is more expensive, ask why. It's
Why?
not a big deal. And you know what? If they don't have a good answer, well, then you know.
And you'll just be contracted essentially with that first funeral home, what they've provided up to that point.
Yeah.
So for maybe the removal or the transfer into their care, if they've already done embalming because you authorized it, you'll need to pay for their embalming. But a lot of times if you find a secondary funeral home, they'll just include the fees on their side and they'll pay that first funeral home, so you don't have to pay both. So every situation works out a little different. But also on the side of the funeral director, we don't always click with a family. So we may be staying with a family and it's just not working, but they want to use our funeral home. And it's us stepping aside from our egos and pride and saying, you know what, I need another funeral director to come in here, if there is one, if you do have one. Or stepping back and saying, I'm not connecting with this family, what can I do? Should I direct them to a different funeral home because it's not working with us?
And I think a lot of funeral directors will do that when we realize we're not connecting and there is no one else that we
Right.
can, I suppose, tag in to replace us. I know a lot of funeral directors that will recommend, can I find someone else maybe will be a better fit for you? It may not be my business.
Well, and sometimes down to price. I think the times that I've had families transfer has been, where I'm sitting talking to them and maybe there is something at a less expensive, let's say direct cremation is what they're going for, and because it's a full service funeral home, the price is higher than maybe at a direct cremation like type society or, funeral home that's focused on that, where I'll say, I don't know that we can serve you the way you need to be served because of the financial end of it. So let me give you a couple names and numbers of places I know where their pricing starts, and I'm gonna leave the room and you can make some calls, or you guys can leave and
Absolutely.
make some calls and direct them, because at the end of the day, they're gonna respect you more for helping them find some place that they're happy with at the end of the whole transaction than you charging them way more than somebody else when they find out somebody else charges less, because they're gonna blame you then for taking advantage of them and stealing from them or whatever might be the situation.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of get outside of yourself and help them be where they need to be at that moment.
I think in
not
the
just
grand scheme
have
of
another
things-
number on your
Yeah,
board.
I think in the grand scheme of things, we don't have to have your funeral. We're probably gonna stay in business anyway.
Right.
We would probably prefer you to have a funeral director that fits.
Fit your needs.
Fit your needs, and of course, we wanna provide that, but if we can't, we just can't. Sometimes people don't get along.
It is
Right.
what it is.
And everybody doesn't feel that way. There are funeral directors who just want that number.
No, not you. No. Whoops. No, she's right though. She's right, that it is a numbers game, and, yeah. Did you get the number on that bus? I threw it right under. No, but she's right.
It
That
is.
There are
It's-
funeral directors that it does come down
That's
to
their
numbers.
first question at a convention. They'll say, so how
Oh,
many,
yeah.
how many calls you do a year? Oh, really? I do 10 more. Okay, great.
I do 10 more.
I do 50 full traditionals, you do 200 direct cremations, it balances out. A number isn't
Yeah.
a number anymore because
Yeah.
of the multiple types of disposition that's available.
Yeah.
But it's still an old school thought
I
process.
tend to roll my eyes anytime someone says it. We're done talking at that point. Okay.
Oh, no, but funeral directors, yeah, totally do that together.
Moving
They puff up, they peacock,
Oh, yeah.
do a little peacocking.
Oh, yeah.
Put their chest out there.
Yeah.
Is it a general practice to bill for storage and removal? Oh, I already talked about that. How often does a funeral home have a state inspection, if any? I'll be interested to hear how Indiana is. And if so, does it entail anything beyond PVE, eye wash stations, the refrigeration getting tested, etc.?
You got, Ryan here got inspected
I just got inspected. And
in Indiana.
I believe it was, we were renewing our certificate of authority for a pre-need, and they went ahead and just
Did
a
your full
Did
inspection.
a full
Yeah, they
inspection.
typically.
So they went through our embalming room. They went pretty deep into it. I didn't really have anything necessarily that was a black eye, besides something that had been there for 30 years and they'd been in there in the past. And
You weren't there
wasn't
that
a big
day, he
deal.
ran.
No. Yeah, I wasn't there that day. The big thing, I will say this, at least in Indiana, they will, the biggest thing that they concentrated on was preneed files. They concentrated on that because that's where, a lot of
It's where your money is.
unethical, fraudulent things, that's where it
That
happens.
happens.
And it does happen, guys. I'm not gonna say it doesn't. It does happen. But the state, at least the state of Indiana, that's the first thing they did. They went through probably about 10 different files,
Yeah.
just to make sure the funding was there. We filled out all our paperwork, signatures were signed, nothing was left, unchecked. So.
Indiana doesn't have the workforce to inspect us often.
No.
So they're inspecting new license, certain
Recerts,
recertifications, mainly complaints. What they're really looking for is, like Ryan said, improprieties with prepaid funds.
Usually what happens.
Because you're catching
yeah.
people, they are.
Usually what happens when that occurs, when all of a sudden the licensure agency comes in, is when someone either has been fired and has been upset, they end up calling in a complaint to them. and
Yes.
That's what happens. That's, in a lot of cases, that's how
That's
some
how
of
those
these
complaints happen.
funerals.
So yeah,
Right.
it's gonna be servicing complaints, and there's a backlog. There's a backlog, and, in Indiana, I think, throwing some numbers out, there's, I think between 20 and 30% of funeral directors are not up to date on their continuing education hours. And they only get caught because we do a random audit every 2 years. And every 2 years, they catch 20 or 30%. And what happens when you're not caught up on your continuing education? You're probably not following the law. You're probably not doing other things. So
It's a domino effect.
it's not all the time.
Because it's not that
Long
hard
and
for your
short.
continuing
Yeah.
ed, it's not that hard.
Well, in Michigan, just because we had all the issues in Detroit where they found the babies and all the cremated remains and such, so the state went through and just is going across the whole state, hitting every funeral home, doing an inspection, a full
Wow.
full-on inspection,
Really?
looking for stuff. So it's good. It's good. It's sad that one really bad thing has to happen in order to get a really good in-depth inspection going on. But they had to bring in, I think it was students from one of the colleges that were in a certain program. They brought them in as inspectors to.
Oh, wow.
So, because they didn't have manpower. I
Yep,
mean,
manpower.
look at every government agency. There's not enough in social work to go do inspections on all the houses that foster kids are in.
Funeral homes
There's-
aren't high on the list.
No, so there's no agency within the government that there's enough staff to cover anything, and funeral homes is the same. OSHA does not really do random inspections either, unless it's kind of the same thing. There's maybe an
Injury.
infraction or something like that.
Yeah.
I have heard they're gonna try and ramp it up with funeral homes. I don't know if they maybe go through the list of vocations and, you
Yeah,
know.
we're down there on the list. But that's one of the things we've been told for years, and one of the things we continue to talk about is, if we know and we see something, we have to self-report. And not just on ourselves, turn yourself in, you need to check yourself, stay in your lane type of thing, but if you know something's happening, we need to police ourselves as an industry, and we need to encourage families who have been taken advantage of and been wronged to file complaints, and we can help them with that.
Right.
And I think that's what happens when families don't know when they have been wronged, they don't know what to do, they don't know who to reach out to. Well, we're phone calls away.
Right.
You can call a funeral director, and it may take 2 or 3 phone calls to find someone who's gonna be sympathetic to your plight, but
Right.
we're out there.
What is the wildest or currently unfathomable practice that embalmers would do in preparing the body, like missing bones using PVC piping, but anything that has to be done and currently is frowned upon? So it's not something that's really unethical, but things we do. I mean, we use duct tape, we
Yep.
use pipes, our broomsticks, or things that are created for replacement with organ and tissue donation, which is what I think she's talking about, or he. I think it's a he. I think LPorter was a he. So like if they remove the long bone in your leg, we have to have something rigid. So there's a pipe or a broomstick or something that has been created for that to replace the rigidity.
So is the question more so what unethical practices may be happening?
I'm thinking
Um,
she's saying wild things do we do that we didn't
Okay.
maybe think that might be frowned upon, but I don't think she's saying unethical
Okay, okay.
because
What wild thing?
What maybe, well, from a reconstruction standpoint, you know, if there's an immense amount of trauma to the facial region and someone wants to have an open casket, we have to go and do some pretty invasive procedures
With permission.
with permission to not only rebuild that skull, but basically put everything back together. There's some definite time that goes into that. I believe, is that called facial resection?
Facial resection.
yeah, we
So,
peel off the whole
If
face.
you've got to take
That-
the soft tissue away from the skull to rebuild the skull.
And here's the thing, guys. I don't think it should look You shouldn't frown upon it
I know,
necessarily.
he's getting in on
I'm a hand guy. You shouldn't frown on it because, quite honestly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a lasting memory picture for that family. Who knows what that family saw if they were in, God forbid, the car and it was a car accident. If they were on scene when it occurred, the last image that they have of that family member
Bless
That was a
you.
bad time sneeze. Sorry. Woo! I got it though.
right on my back. But the last image of that family member could be extremely traumatic. So what we're trying to do is repair all that so you can have that final goodbye the way you want it to be. You know, respectfully, revered, things like that. So
I think that, you know, if you look at, like the PVC piping, I'm kind of going back to that because she referenced it, us using that, how can that be frowned upon, but what is, you know, the aggressive dissection of the body to retrieve what they need to, we are just putting somebody back together essentially.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would frown upon maybe what organ and tissue donor does to a body in order to retrieve. But it's necessary, it's kind of necessary evils, and that's kind of what we do, and it's maybe seen as necessary
Yeah.
evils to get that good end.
In that situation, chances are the PVC pipe is going to be, in our world, provided by our donor service.
Right.
And you're not going to take it out. You're going to clean. You're going to dry. I think some of the things that people may see that may, or when we talk about, they may think is weird is when we have to create bandages, and it is not hodgepodge, but we have to be very creative when creating bandages. And like we've said before, one pinprick can destroy an entire outfit, an entire interior of a casket, just one little. So we've got to find those, and we have to create bandages for them. So a lot of times we're using not saran wrap, but a product like saran wrap, a thin plastic that you can wrap around cotton, something absorbent, and we'll be doing that underneath the clothing. Sometimes there's plastics. A lot of funeral homes use plastics all the time. I think that's probably something that I don't think everyone knows, that their loved one may be from the neck down covered in plastic.
Like plastic undergarments, which I've talked about, like
Yeah.
union alls, coveralls. I need to do 2 minutes on those, I think. This'll remind me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we use that are common to us, so we don't even see them as being maybe odd anymore. But if somebody came in, they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, why do you have denture cream in the prep
Ooh.
room? Ever received a deceased embalmed body from another funeral home, either outside of the state or locally, that you were appalled by their embalming job?
Shall we all?
oh, do we all have stories here?
We all have stories.
Yeah, a lot of them
Those knuckleheads.
go around one state, which we will not name. But I think
There's a few states.
you know, there's times that we do get bodies, but we don't know what the person started with. So it's really hard for us to criticize fully
It's hard to cast judgment.
because we don't know what they started with before the embalming. They might have looked good, and then because there's sometimes a body is firm, and then all of a sudden a day or two later they're
Nah.
super loosey goosey that they have just. All the rigidity is gone and there's no rhyme or reason, or tissue gas sets in and it wasn't there previous, but the body wasn't aggressively embalmed for tissue gas, and by the time we get them, they're in like full-blown tissue gas, and you can blame the embalmer, but if they didn't know what was going on, they couldn't treat it properly. So I think there's a lot of situations where we can go, oh, that was stupid, but we really don't know what was there to begin with.
That is literally an
But-
embalmer's Monday morning quarterback situation.
For
We
sure.
say, we see the end solution to a problem that we don't know what the problem was. We just have the final answer, and we can walk it back going, I would have done this, 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 and this. That may have been done until we get the written report, and sometimes that written report doesn't come, but.
The first thing I look at the written report is just the amount of fluid that was used.
Mhm.
A lot of times it's not sufficient.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. So there are a lot of poor embalmers out there, and you know, a lot who we can't count. We don't know. We all have. Every funeral home has this story, but
You know, and for you guys out there too, from a standpoint of embalming, educate yourself. You know, continue to learn. You know, we go to these conferences. We enjoy them. We go, Burning Fountain's a big one that we.
I want to say one little
Go
funny
ahead.
thing. I'm
Railroad.
gonna cut you
Go
off.
ahead.
Railroad, but funeral directors are exactly like consumers in many, many ways. When we have to find someone to work for us, we put messages on Facebook. We try to find the cheapest person that can do labor for us. And that's what we want. We're trying to find a bottom line. And then we're upset when we have poor workmanship. It
Doesn't make sense.
doesn't, we're like, what are you talking about?
The price reflects what you're getting in any capacity, in any thing you're doing as a consumer. And so same thing with the funeral industry and with, you know, when we're seeking out an embalmer or anything, if you want quality, it doesn't mean you have to pay top price, but sometimes people are the bottom price for a reason.
We go fishing for the bottom price. I see
Well,
it
and
every
here's
day.
the other,
So,
the other
yeah.
thing too is,
And then
you know, if there's been previous funerals there, ask around. You know, ask families that have had funerals there. You know, how did your loved one look? You know, it's not that
As
hard.
funeral directors, we're going to seek recommendations too, just like a consumer would.
Right.
Yeah.
When we're working with a funeral home out of state, we're going to make some phone calls. Hey, what do you know about these folks?
Right.
Good work, not good work, and we usually have pretty good success rates that way.
There's
But-
no Yelp for embalming. It's not like we can go on and get a
No.
route. We should do that.
Wow.
That's like a good
It
idea.
is.
I own it right here.
Bam.
That would be kind of awesome. You can go on and rate the embalmer.
Rate the embalmer.
Before embalming, you set the features. I hear it's difficult after. The body becomes what seems very hard. What does in the preservation of a body with embalming fluid?
With embalming, breaking it down on a cellular level, we have a cell wall. Embalming fluid formaldehyde
You're going deep.
attaches to that cell wall and makes it rigid. Period. It's not concrete. It just makes it rigid. Depending on your formaldehyde concentration, it'll make it maybe more rigid. But when you do that, you dehydrate it, and that's not good either. But there are embalmers that do set features after embalming. I don't know how they do it.
I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense to me because when we set features, we close eyes, we close mouth. Many times, we have to use artificial fixation to keep the mouth shut, whether that's a small suture, whether that's a wire in a barb that is placed in the gum line. But I've done this. I have used just mechanical means, just keeping the jaw shut by pressure. And then when you embalm, and those on a cellular level, we firm, it stays. That's what we wanted. That's why we set features first, because they stay where
Right.
we put them. I'm not sure, and I know embalmers, a small amount of embalmers do this, I don't know why, but they would do that afterwards. It seems risky to
It
me.
doesn't make sense to me, but
I hate
Okay.
just doing the mouth, like the mouth former or cotton or
Ah,
whatever you've
yeah.
got in. I hate when you have to take it out and put it back in after because the mouth is already set, and so some of the tissues may be stretched funny or in a weird spot, and then you're trying to get it to be where you want after. So it's like, get things where you want them before you start,
And
so
I
they
know.
can kind of lock in place.
Yeah, and many times, 2 or 3 days later, we have a family walk in and go, give us a cup full of dentures, and we go, do our best.
yep.
Yeah, we will try to put them in, but you're not gonna, because features are set, you're not gonna open a mouth fully anymore because it is set,
No.
and it's set for a reason.
In those cases, we've created our own dentures in a sense. So
Yes.
usually with
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something
Mouth
like that.
formers and things, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I have a 2-minute on, by the way. So, I think that is all our questions from LPorter. So thank you for submitting them. You guys always are challenging me and coming up with new stuff. I still am blown away by how many questions I have that you've sent that I haven't got to yet. So thanks for these two, Ryan and Brian, for joining us from Indiana up here in Michigan. And let's see, rate, review, comment.
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
Here's the funny thing is she gets way more viewer mail than all of us, so what we would like for you to do is flood her with mail. That would be fun.
Perfect.
We'll appreciate that.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Right on.
Bye.